Good evening and welcome to the Franchise Tag Podcast with me, your host for tonight, Freddie Hall, joined by Adam once again. We are looking at all the Monday night games. Monday night games. We are looking at both the Monday night games and the weekend's games is what I meant. I knew what I was saying. The sentences just weren't really coming out of my mouth. I'm a little tired. I've worked all weekend. I have seen a fair bit of football. I watched quite a lot of the late games last night. Obviously, Adam is eagle-eyed as ever. A power of not watching the Eagles, I hope. I knew you were because you were talking to us about the Steelers game as well. But all the results, we'll talk about them and we'll talk about specific games like we always do, as well as talking about the Monday night football games. This will be the last Monday we do for a week or so. We're not going to be doing one next week because of the Christmas period. So I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you enjoy your Christmas as well. I've definitely got my eyes peeled for that Christmas Day game of the Chiefs v the Steelers. I don't know. I'm not quite worked out how I'm going to wangle pulling away from the family and getting Netflix on, but there's got to be.
What time is it?
I think it's 6:30. I think.
Oh,
yeah. So that's like a little bit. That's sort of like you're either finishing up or like you're just whittling down. And I don't. Yeah. Let's have a little look. I'll have a little look at what time it is. But then
that could be a tough one to get away from. The later one, you'll be fine.
So it's 6 p.m. actually, and then no, that's a lie. Texans Chiefs is at 6. Steelers Ravens is at 9:30.
Oh, you'll be all right.
No, that's next week. Yeah, I'm looking at the wrong week here. Let's have a little look again. Let's do this again. Let's start again. It's Ravens Texans at 9:30 and Steelers Chiefs at 6.
6 o'clock Christmas Day.
Toughy.
Good luck.
Well, we'll have to just ask Santa nicely. Week 15 games. So we had the Thursday night game, which was a terrible game. I watched the highlights for Rams v the 49ers, 12-6. Probably the worst game I've watched this season, I would say. Terrible result. That was earlier in the week. We've had over the weekend, though, the Cowboys beating the Carolina Panthers 30-14. We had the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Cleveland Browns 21-7. The Houston Texans hosted the Miami Dolphins and beat them 20-12. But the first game we're going to be talking about tonight is, of course, my Pittsburgh Steelers losing 27-13 to the Philadelphia Eagles in Lincoln Financial Field. I didn't catch the first half of this game. However, I have watched the highlights. I think, does it all whittle down to one play from Najee Harris and his drop pass that he got? I mean, I know it was more like a run. It was a run, but back for a run. But it felt like the Steelers were sort of, going to the halftime 17-13. It felt like we were on their heels, giving them something to be worried about. And then after that play, it just we couldn't seem to be able to string anything together. It held Barkley up really well, as predicted, because of AJ Brown's sort of outburst in the weekend before. It felt like they were targeting him a lot. Devontae Smith had a good game for the Eagles. They had 401 total yards, the Eagles. They were pretty fantastic, but it felt like that all felt like it was in the second half, really, in this game.
Yeah, it was a difficult one, wasn't it, for the Steelers? I think this was always going to be a very tough matchup, given the way that the Eagles' defense has been playing over the last few weeks, and they do seem to only be getting better. So it was always going to be tough. I don't want to blame it all on Najee dropping the ball at the point where he never really got the ball in the first place, but it kind of felt like it was just one step too far for the Steelers, a little bit. A little bit. And I think in order to win these sort of games, I think the Steelers need to be 100% fit. They need all their players out there, and to not have Pickens out there again was a real issue for them. So when you take Pickens away from that receiving core, there's not a lot. I mean, Pat Freiermuth is solid as a tight end, but after that, Calvin Austin is a speedster and isn't too bad. But you need something to sort of
you then go to Ben Skowronek, who's bounced around the league, Mike Williams,
it's not
teams and not been fit last few years, and
I know you could argue that if every team lost their number one wide receiver, they would be a lot poorer. But I feel like there are teams where it affects them more than others, and the Steelers are definitely one of them teams. The Eagles' defense just completely bottled up the run, stopped that completely, and so basically forced Russell Wilson into passing it. And then because you haven't got George Pickens there, there's a limit to what you're going to get from the other guys that are there. So I think that was the real problem for the Steelers. They just couldn't really do much offensively. And the Eagles, I thought the Eagles just, I mean, in a way, it's kind of nice to see that they can do it without Barkley having an amazing game. And I think that
he was injured. It felt like,
yeah, he sort of kept coming in and out, didn't he? And it was strange. But I kind of felt like they probably knew, this Steelers defense is pretty solid against the run, does pretty well. They knew that if there is a weakness on the Steelers defense, then it is sort of their secondary, and it is being able to stop the passing game. And so they kind of went quite heavy on that. I mean, Barkley did have 19 carries, and obviously Hurts had a load as well, but I just kind of feel like they did prioritize the passing game a bit more because they knew that was the way they could beat the Steelers, and they did it pretty efficiently. And I think, AJ Brown 110 yards, Devon Smith 109 yards. That's kind of exactly what they needed to do. And I think, you mark one of the guys out the game, you go to the other one. I think that was just as simple as what it was. And it showed that Jalen Hurts can play this way. It's just a case of why would you change what's working most of the time? And that was it, really.
I think this is a good litmus test for the Steelers after not being fully fit. I mean, TJ Watt is now injured and won't be at the Ravens game with a minor injury. So, how injured was he in this game in sections? He didn't seem it to me overly in most of the game. Him and Lane Johnson had a really fantastic battle. And you're right. I mean, the criticism at the start of the season for Eagles was, why are they not giving it to Barkley more? This is what's going to make them win. And then they've done that the stats they were putting up yesterday between weeks 1 and 4 and then 4 onwards was remarkable about, since they've moved to Barkley, how more efficient their offense has been, and how much points are scored, the differentials. Like it felt almost like, oh, well, actually the Eagles are becoming a little bit more one dynamic, even though they've got 2 stud wide receivers, an amazing tight end who didn't play yesterday. And actually they sort of defunct, they did. They defunct that yesterday, really, and showed that they can. Now, I would argue, I think a secondary will do better against Hurts. That's been my criticism for a long time about Steelers, though I think it is vastly improved this year. We don't have a great secondary. Dante Jackson had a bit of a knock as well. Joe Porter's still learning. Mink is incredible. And then Deshaun Elliott, who's been brilliant throughout the league. I mean, it's a secondary that is still developing, and linebacking core is pretty young as well. So yeah, I don't think our injuries and our lack of experience in that area, it should diminish the Eagles' win here, because they played a really efficient game and they really controlled their own destiny in this game. We saw a bit of a prodding joke that the Minkah Fitzpatrick hit on Barkley was a little bit rough or a bit dirty. I generally have not seen the tackle still. Like, I know I was bickering and bantering with Gareth on our WhatsApp group page, but did you think, because there was a bit of a scuffle as well where Washington sort of took Slay for a ride and into the end zone, and they had a bit of a to-do? Is it just sport being sport rather than anything malicious?
Yeah, I kind of felt like, I mean, this is what happens in these games. It's like there was a bit of needle all the way through it. And it kind of, to me, it felt like it was both sides. There was a bit where Jalen Carter was kind of like just, was just sort of like being incredibly aggressive for kind of no real reason at a certain point. And that, I mean, yeah, if you really want to get sort of really analytical on it, you could probably come out and go, yes, he's sort of gone for his ankle. Yes, he's kind of like twisted it a little bit and stuff like that. But it happens, doesn't it? In these games, it's like it happens all the time. And I mean, the one that I think was probably I would argue was worse was the one on AJ Brown, where I mean, I thought the whole point of these hip drop tackles were meant to be going out of the game, and yet to me, you look at it and it's like, well, it's pretty close to being a hip drop tackle. I mean, that's the one really, and now it looks like the Brown could potentially miss. It doesn't seem like a lot, but could potentially miss a game. That is probably what I would say, when you've got an official right in front of it as well, that's the one that should really be being looked at. The Fitzpatrick one, yeah, you could if you wanted to, but it happens in all games. You see it all the time where it's like, guys are sort of like, they're going into tackle and they're not 100% on their feet and they slip and they sort of, just get the wrong angle. And you see it all the time with the rough in the passer call, don't you, as well? It's like, you see these rough in the passer
the sliding. I mean,
exactly.
Yesterday, that really is, I think, Kenny Pickett's fault after he did that fake slide a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
changed everything in a way where it was like, hang on a minute, like we've actually got to commit to
the defender's already going. He's already kind of left the ground in order to make the tackle, and yet you're going to argue that it's too late, and so you're going to penalise him for it. I think it's difficult, and then sometimes officials they let more go because of the type of game it is, because they know that certain guys are going up against each other. We moan like anything when all they do is throw flags. And so, the last thing that you want to see all the time is just constantly players being penalised all the time. So I think you could have done, if you really wanted to, if you want to go by the sort of like the laws and the rules and really 100% by it, you probably could have got Fitzpatrick on something there. And, like I say, the one on AJ Brown could have been another one that could have been a hip drop tackle. But I felt like the officiating crew just decided that they were going to let a lot go in this, and they just kind of let them get on with it. And that's, to be honest, is kind of what we want to see half the time. So
I will give a special shout out to this Eagles defense that's really coming into its own in last few weeks. I mean, some of these guys, Zach Brown, probably best linebacker in the league this year. Cooper DeJean, Quinion Mitchell, that looks like, I mean, to be honest, us being smarter people around the draft were in hysterics at how Cooper DeJean got to the Eagles when he was quite noticeably a candidate for a first round pick and still dropped. And Quinion Mitchell even was a player that people were discussing being a top 15 pick. And they got both of them. And, and the guys that they've got, I mean, Nolan Smith's come into their own a bit more. Josh Sweat wasn't the most notable pass rusher for them 2 seasons ago and has stepped into that Hassan Reddick sort of shoes really well. Jalen Carter's doing great. I mean, Jordan Davis feels like the odd one out a little bit at the minute. He's still good, but he sort of came in with so much promise and has sort of been left to the wayside a little bit by everyone else. But they seem to, we've said it for the Eagles, it's depth. They've got such good depth at most of their positions, offensively and defensively. I mean, Calcaterra, the tight end for them, even a decent game. Like, they've got guys everywhere. So that's just going to continue. And it wouldn't shock me. I would put good money on now. This is an NFC Championship team for me. I think they're good enough to go and do that now. If they stay fit as well, I think that is really important as well. But they need to stay fit.
They're really good, and you're right about the NFC Championship thing. They should be getting there. Really, they're the number 2 seed still, I believe, but it's it should be them and the Lions if the Lions can stay fit, which they can't. So.
Let's turn our attention to the rest of the games of the weekend with the Jets beating the Jaguars. I believe this was an overtime game, right?
Which one was that?
Jets Jags.
Yes, it was 25 all, wasn't it? And then it was
32-25 to the Jets in the end. I remember reading that, 'cause it was on the early slate when I was still at work. The Commanders beating the New Orleans Saints by a single point, 20-19. The Ravens rolled into New York and smashed the Giants 35-14, taking them to 9-5 in the division now. We then had the Cincinnati Bengals beating the Tennessee Titans by 10, 37-27. And for the next game, we are going to be discussing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers beating the Los Angeles Chargers 40-17. Seen the highlights this game. I mean, I have a lot of interesting things where you could you could argue both of these teams could make a Super Bowl in a way. But I mean, and I'm going to say it because I've not said it yet. Baker Mayfield's playing out of his mind this year. He's been I've hated Baker for a long time, being if it was Cleveland Browns and how he was, and I never really liked him. Never really liked him coming out of the draft and everything like that. And I've never been that bothered about what he does. And I thought, he'll do all right with the Buccaneers and it will sort of will off. But man, he just plays well. He plays their style really well, and they've been helped tremendously by a player like Bucky Irving, who I don't remember there being a lot of hype around him in the draft. And he's, 117 yards, 15 carries, no touchdowns on the day for him. But then, Mike Evans having a career day, 159 yards, 2 touchdowns, a player that we've said on this podcast is criminally underrated around the league and isn't talked about enough. And it's a Chargers team, I think that, in a year's time, this is a closer scoreline. I think they are still learning. And what I thought was noticeable about this, because I actually think these teams are incredibly similar, very, very similar in what style they want to play. They want to have rock hard defense, run the ball mostly, but have the skill players to be able to throw it over the top. The only difference is that Bucks have Mike Evans and players of that caliber, and Justin Herbert has Lad McConkey, Quentin Johnston, and Josh Palmer. And I think all three are good wide receivers, but there's not a true one there, is there, really, out of these guys? And I think Herbert is just missing. It's stupid because he had it and it didn't work when they were there, but he's missing Keenan Allen. He is missing someone like that. Almost someone like Amari Cooper would be perfect in this scenario, because I think Keenan's just maybe not quite the safer hands as Amari Cooper is. But yeah, what did you make of this game?
Surprising. I'm really surprised by the
scoreline. I was
scoreline. Yeah, really shocked by that. I wasn't expecting the Chargers to have 40 points put up against them. This defense that has been so good all season really struggled, and they struggled against the run and the pass. So they really did struggle with it. So that was the biggest takeaway, was just how much. And I feel like that was almost more. It was surprising because I felt like the Chargers defense has been good all season, but not only that, I was surprised that the Bucks managed to really do it and be able to put as many points as they did up on them. When it comes to the Chargers, I think they're definitely a run first team, and the J.K. Dobbins injury has really killed them. It's really caused a lot of problems. Gus Edwards just isn't doing it, hasn't done it this year.
They had on 8 carries.
Yeah. So it was a real struggle for them. And Kimani Vidal is just I think he was a 5th round, 6th round pick rookie. So you can't expect too much from him in that respect. I really like Lad McConkey. I think he's really good. I agree. I don't think he's necessarily gonna become Cooper Kupp, but I think he has the potential to get to that point. But he's that kind of wide receiver, and I think you need a kind of a big, strong outside, going down the numbers on the outside kind of wide receiver. And as you said, one of the massive difference makers here was Mike Evans, and that's exactly who you need on the Chargers side.
I think also he needs I completely agree. I think he's lacking the 2 years of experience you need to get that level as well, which he will eventually get there, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's, as you say, that will just be time with McConkey, that he will get better and stuff like that. Quentin Johnston, although he has improved, isn't Mike Evans and probably never will be, and that's the real issue. So I think the Chargers they need to I think they've still got a very good chance of ending up in the playoffs. I don't think there's they've got the number 7 seed at the moment. They're 2 games ahead of the Colts. I don't see that changing. So I think they're going to get in the playoffs, which for the first season under Harbaugh is a hell of a good return. So I think that they've done well, and they need to somehow either bring in free agency, which is probably going to be difficult this year because there's not that much, but if not through free agency, then as a draft pick, they need to bring in another wide receiver who they feel is going to be that sort of like big bodied wide receiver, AJ Brown type player that can.
Problem is they won't have a pick for someone like a Tetero McMillan.
No, they won't. So they won't be able to get either of the top two. But there are guys out there that they'll be able to
talking about here for anyone who doesn't know who Tetero McMillan is.
So there will be guys out there that they will be able to go for who will be a bit more like that. But at the moment, it's because of where they're going to be picking, it's going to be tough to get a real top quality one. And then from the Bucks' point of view, I think that actually something that's sort of happened in the last couple of weeks has been the emergence of Jalen McMillan. And that has kind of replaced Chris Godwin. I think that was the issue. We were a little bit like, yeah, they've got Mike Evans, but okay, Cade Otton's okay, but there's not really much behind it. Jalen McMillan's had 3 touchdowns now in 2 weeks, and he's putting up the yards as well. So I think that has really helped them, because the thing with Mike Evans is, as great as he is, he can't do it all by himself. So it's like having McMillan there, it's another passing threat. They're moving the ball more. Then obviously, as we always know, if you can get the pass going, that gets the run going, and vice versa. And as you said, Bucky Irvin and Rashad White was solid as well. But like Bucky Irvin has really sort of like turned up in the last sort of month. And yeah, they just look really, really good. And they've got, that now it would be surprising if they didn't win this division now, because the Falcons just haven't been what we thought they were going to be. And
I've sort of weirdly go,
the
Chargers feel like they want to be a bit like the Bucks, and they feel very similar. And then the Bucks almost feel like very similar to Green Bay as well. Like when you're looking at the NFC, AFC in the playoff sort of race, Green Bay and Tampa are sort of similar in that, like, good defenses, good run game. Again, Green Bay doesn't have a star in terms of like Mike Evans, but they have 3 incredibly good wide receivers, decent tight end play, and then a quarterback who is good but has that. It is the guns. Baker's still got a pick in this game. Baker is still susceptible to making some errors, just like Jordan Love is with Green Bay. And is that maybe what ultimately holds both of them teams back, I suppose, with an NFC playoff path?
I mean, it probably does. They're both sort of like, it's almost like there's tiers, isn't there, in the NFC when you look at it? It feels very much like you've got the Lions and the Eagles are the sort of top tier. And then once you get past that, you're sort of looking, I think the Bucks are one. I think the Rams, I think is another one that's actually quite similar. The difference is that I would say that Puka's probably of a better quality than basically all the number ones on the other teams. But I think the Bucks, I think the Rams, I think the Packers, probably the Vikings as well, because I think you've kind of got them 4 that are kind of next, and then after that you've got the Commanders, who are kind of like, then they're not quite, they're ironically they're rebuilding, but they're trying to win at the same time, and then you've kind of got the rest, where it's almost like they're a bit like they're close, they're not far off of it, like the Seahawks and the Cardinals and teams like that, but they're not quite playoff teams at the moment. So I think it is. The Bucks are probably going to be the 3 or 4 seed based on where they're going to be. They're going to end up playing the Vikings or the Packers. It is where it feels like that's what's going to happen.
And if I'm honest with you, when I look at both of them games, coin flip. Both.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. I think the Packers kind of have. I feel like Jordan Love has the potential to really go off, but then at the same time, so does Baker Mayfield. This is the thing. So it is really difficult. I mean, you look at Baker's stats for the season, and there's only Lamar and Joe Burrow that's thrown more passing touchdowns than him, but he's thrown 14 interceptions. which is like, it's a lot. I think it's the most. No, Kirk Cousins has had the most on the season, but he's only missing it by one. So it's been he is a bit like that. Love is a similar one, as you say, and Stafford is another one who's quite up for throwing an interception every now and then. And yeah, it's good. I think it's going to be quite interesting.
Them games and them matchups that you're saying about, exciting stuff.
Yeah, really absolutely.
Like, I can imagine all them games being a game that I'm going to certainly watch all the games anyway in the playoffs. But for the neutral, I think most of them matchups you go like, I want to watch that. Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson against Baker and Mike Evans, and then both of them really good. Vikings so good at turning the ball over. Bucks are really solid defense, and then the Packers and Bucks as well. And then the Packers and Vikings obviously writes its own narrative, being divisional rivals as well. Like I feel like the AFC's been sort of the flag bearer for football for the last few years with excitement, and yet you could argue, I think you could definitely say the NFC this year is feeling more dominant teams in a way, or more exciting teams in a way. So
I think they're exciting because they're kind of up and coming.
Yeah.
As well. I think that's the difference. Yeah, I think that's why they're kind of exciting, and they do feel quite close in like you say, in sort of standard between the teams. Whereas I think with the AFC, you kind of, I do still feel like, I mean, if the Lions can get some of their guys back, I do still think it's Lions and Eagles, and that's the end of it. So I think they'll all just end up beating each other, but them two will be the two in the championship. Right? But when it comes to the AFC, obviously, there are teams like, you do have the Chargers and the Broncos that are kind of like looking as though they're sort of trying to work it out, trying to come up and get good again. But it does kind of feel like some of these other teams maybe do have the potential to. It doesn't feel quite as exciting because, you've got the Chiefs, the Bills, who feel, I know the Chiefs have been bad, but when it comes to the playoffs, we all know what they do. And it just kind of feels like, oh, well, they'll just go off and win it all, sort of thing. And that's the only downside with the AFC.
I think there's a little bit of a lack of like consistency with the AFC. The Steelers not overly consistent, though, have been good the last few weeks, not overly consistent. Ravens, huge one that's not been overly consistent. The Chiefs, though consistent in winning, not exactly consistent in their play. So it's a tough one. Texans not consistent at all.
Don't you think though that's because like the Bengals, Dolphins could go out and beat anyone on their day?
With the
NFC, I feel like the lower teams just aren't in that position. No.
Exactly. It'll make for a hot playoff race. I'm very much excited for the next few weeks of football. We'll move to the Cardinals beating the New England Patriots at home 30-17. The Denver Broncos beating the Colts 31-13. That game actually solidified Steelers' place in the playoffs. So thank you very much, Denver Broncos and Bo Nix. The Green Bay Packers played the late game last night, beating the Seattle Seahawks 30-13, which fantasy-wise was fantastic for me. And then let's move to what might be the most exciting game of the season so far, and that was the Buffalo Bills beating the Detroit Lions in Detroit 48-42. I was watching the Steelers game avidly and obviously had this on in the background, and it felt like every time I looked at it, something crazy was happening. This was a nuts game. Over 1,000 yards of total offense, over 300 yards, 350 yards of passing on each team. I mean, Detroit couldn't run it. They had 48 yards of rushing, and Buffalo's 197. There was turnovers. There was craziness. It was 5 touchdowns by Goff. I mean, 193 yards on Ross St. Brown, who I said it last night over text, but I'm going to say now, my favorite receiver in the NFL. There is better receivers. I agree. My favorite way. Absolutely fantastic player. Career day for him. I mean, we sort of thought this would be a barnstormer when they meet, but this might be seen as, in a few years, as that Chiefs-Rams game where it was meant to be Mexico and then it was in LA. No, yes, it was in LA. It wasn't in St. Louis then. They were already in LA because they were at the Coliseum at the old one where it was sort of falling down a little bit. I think, this game is going to be the one where people look back and think, wow, what a game. Yeah,
not a lot of defense on this game.
There wasn't a lot of defense in the other game. Well, there was a little bit, but then there wasn't all at the same time. I mean, yeah, no interception, one fumble, but
90 points, so just about hit the over. It was a pretty mental game, and the idea that Jared Goff could throw nearly 500 yards, 5 touchdowns, and lose is pretty mental.
Wow.
I don't think there was any. I just kind of feel like in this game that basically defense went out the window, and it was very much a case of I'm going to outscore you. That was all it was. And the one thing I would say is I do feel like the Bills kind of made a bit of a sort of like a stamp on the game very early on. Yeah. So it kind of felt like their first drive, they made a point. And I actually felt like the Packers did this in Seattle last night, but the Bills very much, it was like, we're gonna run the ball. We're going to use Josh Allen's legs as much as we can. You know, we will pass it as well. But like they kind of went down that route, that very first run, and just went, we're not afraid of you. We're going to outscore you. And that was kind of how it felt to me, that was how it was played. And that was kind of how it played out. And as great as the Lions were, it didn't matter because the Bills were just like, we're just going to outscore you. And so that was kind of the end of it. I do feel like, I mean, Josh Allen has booked the MVP now. I think that's the end of that. As much as I thought Goff would have a really good season, and he has had a great season, he's not going to get that off of Allen now. I think he's just scoring so many touchdowns with his legs, but also passing as well. And yeah, they just look like two really good teams, and you can only hope that it's the Super Bowl. You know, for any neutral, you can only hope
I'll let all our viewers or listeners in on a secret. If this is the Super Bowl, this will not be the scoreline.
No, I
think it will be 20 to 40 to 17. It will be like so boring and dull because we've had it so exciting in a way. Like, Super Bowl never feels like it's that high score, even though we have had high scoring Super Bowls. It never feels like it's that high scoring. But no, I agree with the Josh Allen thing. Now I think Jared Goff was definitely in that route for it. But then he had that game with the 4 picks or 5 picks. And so it was like, well, we can't really give an MVP to it. Then you got Saquon Barkley, but then Saquon's not done much in the last game, which you sort of need to be great every game in a way, don't you? And Josh Allen has, but I mean, I'm sure Josh Allen has had games, but they do it without. They did it without Amari Cooper, Amari Cooper was injured, right?
Sure. Amari Cooper was. Well, I don't. No one really seems to know quite what happened because Amari Cooper was there, but he didn't have a single.
Didn't have a single target
reception. It was really strange.
Their best receiver was Ty Johnson, which is pretty. But I think both these teams know how they want to play. They know how they want to play. I mean, I think the biggest thing coming out of this game is David Montgomery now looking like he's done for the season. It's just come out in the last half an hour, but he's just some to his MCL, PCL, or ACL. I can't remember which one it is, but it's looking like that he might be out for the season. Which I love Jahmyr Gibbs, and obviously I say obviously, you know this, but not everyone else does. I have Jahmyr Gibbs on fantasy football, and I love him. And I just don't know whether that Thunder and Lightning combination, or Knuckles and Sonic as they call themselves, it will that hinder the team going forward? I don't know. I think that's a big thing. They are like you said already, they are getting unhealthy pretty quickly. There's a lot of guys going down for them. A lot of guys are out for the season now. I think you're one Penei Sewell away with the Lions for me to be like, that's it. I think you're done. It would be like that sort of thing for me now, where I'd be like, I don't see these guys doing it, because though they are a really, really great team, really exciting team, I've got some fantastic players and quite a wide selection of fantastic players. They're not totally they haven't got total depth, and the big players they have, they do heavily rely on. You know what I mean? So it's just come out actually. Sorry, Chef has just tweeted something I think a bit more about It says out indefinitely. So
yeah.
and they've lost Ali McNeil as well.
Yes, yeah, he went out of the game, didn't he?
Yeah.
Which obviously they just paid a big amount of money for him, during this season. I think it is going to be very difficult for them. Obviously, losing all of this, you do worry,
Sorry
like.
to interrupt. I didn't realize Carlton Davis also suffered a fractured jaw.
Oh, okay.
He's out indefinitely as well.
Right. Okay. So they've had a lot go here. You do have to, is Gibbs going to be able to take the workload as well is another concern, because obviously he's not used to doing that. I know he did it in college, but he's not used to doing it. Look, since he's been at the Lions, so that's a potential issue. And I think that obviously this game, it kind of, Goff had a great game and he did really well. And this is where I think, though, that when you start getting all of these injuries, do you have the ability to be able to lean onto the quarterback and get over the line? I think this might be where the difference comes in when you sort of start looking at Super Bowl winning teams and stuff like that. Josh Allen, I think, has the potential to do that and has shown many times that he's done it in these kind of games and during the season. But also, like, he's missed out because of the Chiefs, basically. But like, if he gets the chance and it's a Super Bowl, I would feel that who would you think would have more chance of being the one who puts the team on their back and makes that difference? I think Allen is probably the one more likely to do it than Goff. And if you have all of them injuries and you start really giving up a lot of points because you're losing these defensive guys, that's going to be a problem. So I think that's where it becomes an issue. Are you going to have to play? I know the Super Bowl's in a dome, so you're fine with Goff. But what happens if they lose a game in the next couple of weeks and the Eagles get the first seed? You got to go away to the Eagles. That's not going to be fun for him. This is where the problem comes in. There are a few concerns with the Lions because of things like that.
And when we look at the Bills, I mean, back-to-back weeks now, wild games with the Buffalo Bills on the losing side of 1 week, on the winning side of this week. Is you voiced your concerns 4 weeks ago, but you were saying the Ravens, they will not succeed because of their secondary. That's what will hinder them. Are we now looking at the Bills where we're like, you need to tighten up this defense? You can't outscore everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to have to, because they will struggle. It's the same as I said with the Ravens. If you go and you start giving up loads of points and your secondary just doesn't do anything and doesn't improve. I mean, the Bills are slightly different because it's injuries, isn't it, on the secondary rather than just poor play. So it's like, if they can get any of them guys back, then obviously that will be great for them. The Ravens is just been bad play in the secondary all season. But so that there is a potential where it's not an issue for the Bills. But yeah, I mean, they really do need to tighten that up, because if you just keep giving away large amounts of points, eventually there will come a time that you'll go up against the defense and Josh Allen will not be able to score or rush in like 4 touchdowns or 6 touchdowns in a game. Like, you can't do it every game. He will have an off day at some stage. And if that happens, and it also happens to be on the day that your secondary isn't working, well, you're done. And that's the problem. So outscoring teams is tough in order to win a Super Bowl. Like, to go through every round outscoring, putting up these sort of numbers, it's difficult. And I feel more confident in this team being able to do it than the Ravens, because I think that you might get some guys back. But yeah, the idea of being able to go out and score like 40 points every game is, you're going to find someone who's going to stop you.
Yeah, exactly. Right, let's turn our attention to tonight's games. We have two teams with the same record, but numbers switched around, with the 11-2 Vikings and the 2-11 Raiders. So the Chicago Bears are coming up against divisional rivals Minnesota Vikings. Vikings 11-2. The Bears 4-9. That has been hosted in Minnesota, and we also have the Atlanta Falcons traveling to Vegas against Las Vegas Raiders. There, Falcons are 6-7, Raiders at 2-11. Falcons really needing this win if they want to be looking at winning their division and also going to the playoffs. And the Bears really, playing sort of for pride at this point, and the Vikings playing for, in their minds, potentially with the Lions lost now, a first round bye. Really, they've got to be in that conversation now. I don't think we need to sort of split these games out. I think we can talk about both these games in their totality. Because neither games I would stay up for, nor will stay up for, because quite clearly this is Vikings beating the Bears and Falcons beating the Raiders, isn't it? I mean, Desmond Ridder is facing his former team. It's looking like he's going to be playing for the Raiders as they're out without Gardner Minshew and Aiden McConnell. However, it's uncertain that Aiden McConnell might suit up and be about. I mean, what? Why didn't he? What's the point in a way? Like, you're 2-11, you know where you're going. You're going for, you bought a one-way ticket to Shador Sanders at Colorado. That's what you're doing here at this point, and you're trying to not get the wins and allow the Giants to be behind you if you're doing that. So, yeah, what are you thinking here? I think 2 low-scoring games as well. I don't think it's not going to be high-scoring either of these.
No, I don't think they're going to be very high scoring. They're actually the Bears Vikings is the over unders at 43.5 and the Falcons Raiders at 44.5. So I feel like that they're both potentially a little bit high in both of these games. I think they might drop down a little bit. As you said, look, the Raiders they currently have the number 1 pick. They might not end up with the number 1 pick, even if they lose all their games, because of the strength of schedule and what the Giants are playing. So it's very, very close still. So they kind of need to make sure that they lose this game, to be honest. I mean, Desmond Ridder he's meant to be starting. He hasn't really done much in his career in the NFL, and I'd be surprised if we saw much happen. I mean, he might have a bit of an incentive because he's going up against his old team, but even still, I wouldn't expect too much. As you said, the Falcons need to win if they've got any hopes of getting into the playoffs. I think they are 3 games off, which means they need to win this and probably the last 2 in order to try and sneak in to the 7th seed if they can. So yeah, it's a tough one. They need to win this, and they should win this relatively comfortably, to be honest, because you're going up against a team who have very little incentive to play for here. So I think the Falcons win this fairly comfortably. I agree with you. I don't think it'd be very high scoring. And the Vikings Bears, I think there might be a little bit more of a fight between these two, just purely because they're divisional teams, and I think the Bears will want to try and upset the Vikings a little bit here and maybe do something against them. They're also, the Bears defense is a bit better, but I think we saw last week, didn't we, with Darnold? I mean, he looked really good, and Jefferson has kind of got more involved. He's sort of been very quiet this season, but he got more involved last week. They're at home. 7-point favourites, which might be a little high, but it's kind of fair enough. I think the Vikings are just a better team at the moment, and the Bears in a way are another team a little bit like the Raiders. They're not going for a quarterback or the number 1 pick, but I think they're just they need to just sort of understand that they're going through a bit of a rebuild at the moment, and obviously they need to get themselves a new head coach as well. So yeah, I think it's just going to take time with the Bears. But like you say, Falcons, Vikings, I'd be surprised if either of them lost.
What's your scoreline prediction for each of them?
I think Bears, Vikings, you're probably looking 24-14, I'd say, for the Vikings. And then I'm not even sure if the Raiders are going to get to 14, to be honest.
I'd put Falcons at 20 to 9.
Yeah. I mean, I think 14 might be pushing it a bit for the Raiders. So yeah, I mean, 3 field goals kind of makes sense. If it is Ridder as well for the Raiders. So yeah, something like that. Maybe a little bit more for the Falcons. because I do think that they've got potential to do something. And also Max Crosby's he's out, isn't he? So I think that will help the Falcons a bit. So maybe like 24-9, something like that. Maybe 24-12. But I can't imagine there'd be much more coming from the Raiders. So yeah, not exciting, I'm afraid.
Well, we won't be staying up. I don't know if any of you will be staying up. Fans of these teams may stay up, but I wouldn't. I just have to lie and watch the highlights in the morning. Just don't check your phone. Adam, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Thank you for listening or watching on our YouTube channel. Make sure you like and subscribe and leave a comment, and make sure you keep following us on all our social media outlets. We have lots of fun stuff coming your way always. This is probably going to be our last week of broadcasting prior to Christmas. Make sure you catch tomorrow's Tuesday discussion show, the Thursday college show, and also the betting show at the weekend. Lots of fun to come, and we'll see you all very, very soon, and have a great Christmas.